Hello, and welcome to Beyond the Firewall, the business bytecast, where tech meets business. Get expert insights and real-world business leaders, IT experts, and the latest trends in bite-sized episodes. Stay ahead and explore what's beyond the firewall.
And welcome back to Beyond the Firewall, where we're always bringing in amazing speakers and thought leaders. Today, like no other, we've brought in Keith from Fast Start Go. Keith, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
My pleasure, Aris. I have spent the last 35 years in the IT segment in sales and sales leadership positions. And most importantly, I've always been able to, and my teams have met or exceeded quota expectations. The last 5 years, I've really been passionate about building up Fast Start Go, first as a spinoff from our agency, the TSRM Group, and today it's a standalone entity. And what do? We help business owners, MSPs, salespeople, technology pros in improving their sales skills. They, as we're challenged in many ways as some of the uncertainties in the world that we live in, it has become even a little bit more challenging to sell IT solutions. So what we're about at Fast Start Go is enabling this generation of IT salespeople to meet their career objectives, and owners and MSPs and solution providers incrementing their sales as a result of investing into the Fast Start Go platform.
Very interesting, and congratulations to the long history of the organization. You know, most businesses don't survive that decade, 2 decades, so you're well beyond that. So congratulations to the success. You know, when you start talking about sales processes and sales training and sales challenges, listeners out there are always looking at it going, my number one challenge may be sales.
Right.
Not everybody, but a lot of people say that that's the number one challenge that they're always having. With today being AI, the new workforce, the legacy workforce, what are you seeing as some of the biggest challenges today in sales and marketing?
Hiring good salespeople that could hit the ground running and contribute to both revenue and, equally as important, more important, to the gross profit margins of the organization. And it's largely due to the fact that many of the folks that are in business leadership positions today amongst solution providers and MSPs have not really experienced the ups and downs of the economy and some of the challenges of the new competitive elements that have been created through AI and other innovations. So as a result, the sales cycle itself has become longer, and as cash has become thinner, reps or business leaders are now looking to improve the sales cycle, shorten the sales cycle, and bring in sales reps that are going to hit, as I said, hit the ground running and generating revenue. So how do you do that, right? And it's largely tied to starting with who are you recruiting and bringing in to your sales team. And oftentimes solution providers and MSPs will bring in folks that have worked for the competition. And I often question, why are you hiring folks that work for the competition? Because generally speaking, folks that are in sales for solution providers and MSPs that are doing well because they're generating great gross profit margin. Why would you want to leave a company where you basically have created your own business within a business? Oftentimes, the folks that are recruited in from a competitive MSP are folks that are not necessarily doing very well. So oftentimes we are recruiting in mediocre sales candidates that are prejudging the new situation based upon past experience. 3 to 6 months later, the sales manager or the business owner is asking questions. Why isn't the sales rep generating any business? And it's generally tied to the fact that their skills are not that sharp, and they have lacked the heart to really succeed in sales.
Interesting perspective. And I can say that, over the decades that I've been in business as well, and I use that phrase now, I can't believe it, where we've hired, fresh talent And we've also hired guys from the competition or, sometimes from the distributor, sometimes from vendor. It's hard because, you're also adopting somebody else's training into your ecosystem. And,
Mhm.
I've had challenges where I had this great rep. He was amazing at another agency, came over here, and our sales process was very different. And it wasn't as, call it, formal. And so they felt lost and they weren't as successful in our ecosystem
Mhm.
and hiring fresh talent. And they had no pre existing notions, ended up being a lot more successful because they just adopted whatever we showed them from day one. So yeah, I see that as a common challenge.
And I agree with the idea of hiring fresh talent because the fresh talent, relatively inexperienced, has not been compromised by bad work habits. And therefore, when they come into a fast start go culture, for example, they're going to start their careers and develop good habits, productive habits, so that they're generating profits for the organization.
Yes, very true. And that is a success there. So when you're talking about, successful sales associates, and this is in general, we're not
Mhm.
just talking about tech, you know, what are some of the key, call it, factors that separate the good from the average? And I'm going to use that because I don't want to say the bad because if you're bad in sales, you shouldn't be in sales. So what's the sort of the key, some of those key elements that
I
good
think it's
salespeople have?
I think it's the competitive spirit of the individual. So I'm not too concerned about whether the person has a technology background or not. But what I am most concerned with is what they have in terms of competitive spirit and what they have in the old ticker and the heart, right? That's what we look at, right? If the person is reasonably intelligent, can listen, respond, and communicate well, then they can be incredibly successful.
And so would you say that that is like an EQ thing versus an IQ thing? Or how do you kind of like, I'm just trying to figure that out. Are they more technical or are they more personable? Where's the
So
savviness?
we
Where do you
talk
lean on
about,
it?
I'm sorry, but
Sorry.
we're talking about right brain versus left brained. And if we look at engineering types of folks, they're generally more left brained, and salespeople tend to be a little bit more right brained. But as we move forward into the late second half of the 20s here and beyond, what we're finding is sort of a mix, right? Of a person who has good EQ, but also has the ability to absorb the information, the technology, and be able to understand it well enough to qualify new business opportunities. But personality and engagement style is still incredibly important, and asking the right questions, being able to engage with the person. And the way we engage and calling on end users as we do as solution providers and MSPs is quite different than if we're an OEM or an ISV that really isn't out there closing the business as much as helping with the marketing and general business development. And as a result, what I see out there is when solution providers and MSPs bring folks in from manufacturers, oftentimes those folks don't hit the ground running because it's really a different sales process from beginning to end. Because the manufacturer is generally partnering with a solution provider and an MSP. So it's really the MSP that's taking the lead on the true sale. So when you bring in a person from a manufacturer's background and expect them to hit the ground running, selling to end customers or end users, a little bit challenging.
Right. And do you think that there's a difference today? And obviously there's different elements around this, around, the next generation, younger generation versus the older generation. Forget, I can use the words of millennials versus
Hmm.
Gen Xers. Do you think that there's a vast difference between that in somebody in sales, or
Yeah.
is there sort of a single pane of glass there?
I don't think there's a single pane of glass. And I've been around a while now and I've watched this evolve over time. And back in the day when I started and many of my colleagues of my generation started back in the 90s or even in the 80s, a lot of what we did was transactional. So the sales engineer would take the lead. We would come in and provide the fulfillment for the opportunity and sell it at really good gross profit margins back then, whether it be services, which always had good profit margins, or if it was hardware, which back in the day had better profit margins than they do now. Now, what has evolved and where Fast Start Go, our organization, is from a training perspective is today's sales rep has to be a trusted advisor, has to be able to understand the business issues that the end customer and user is having and be able to at least preliminarily qualify, discover a need, and have a more engaged conversation with the prospective buyer than, say, 30 years ago when it was just, as I said, more transactional. I'll get my engineer involved and move out of the way. But today's engagements are with smaller end user accounts, not necessarily the enterprise. So, you're going to develop that more hands-on relationship with the customer than we did back in the day.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think, there's an old saying about knowing your audience, right? At the end of the day, in most cases, the decision makers relate to various account managers, and you have to have those personality traits. Doesn't matter if you're Gen Xers or millennials or whatever. Not at the end of the day, if those two, don't have the same wavelength, doesn't matter where they're at in their process.
Empathy is incredibly important as in creating empathy with the prospective buyer and understanding who the buyer is, what is their background, and most importantly, what are the business objectives to accomplish. So the discussion should be around how IT is going to improve operating efficiencies, profitability, client or customer experience. Of course, from a managed service perspective, keeping things like security at top of mind as well, right? But the trusted advisor today, choose to use the term trusted advisor in lieu of just sales rep, has to be able to be skilled enough to ask insightful questions about the business, how the applications that they're running are impacting the business positively and maybe not so positively, and how can we as solution providers and MSPs improve the business outcomes of the people or the accounts that we're calling on. So technology, in effect, is a facilitator for improved business experience.
Interesting. A little bit of a thought there for me. Yeah, very true.
So
So go ahead.
the way you sell has dramatically changed, and you could still compete on, a bid by bid basis, but are you really creating relationships that create monthly reoccurring revenue, right? Doing the transactional business. I know people that have been wildly successful operating that way. But I think as we evolve into these 30s and beyond, the way we sell technology has to be more consultative and less transactional in nature.
Agreed with you on that 100%, because that's everything that we're doing today. Because when you look at consumers today purchasing on a transactional, you don't need me. There's
Right.
products like Amazon, right? Like you go on shop.com or Shopify or Amazon, there's your transactional business. There's no relationship. It's I need this, I'm buying it now, and products at my door in 1 hour. So, when it comes down to more of a high value, high sticker, and especially when you're in the professional services world, be it in IT, be it in legal, be it in accounting, you can't sell it anymore transactionally. I think that experience is no longer valid for anybody. Nobody wants to go and say, here's my company, please manage it for me. Here's my transaction. Here's my
Right.
$10,000 invoice. What did I just pay for? Like it doesn't make any sense. So I think that we are all seeing a massive evolution across the board when it comes to sales, sales processes, sales teams, compensation structures.
Mhm.
It's a whole evolution, and with AI now going to be prevalent, and we already see e-com like Amazon has taken foothold and other platforms like it. I think we're due for, call it, sales 2.0 or sales 3.0. Depending on how old you are, you may want to call it a 3 or 4.0, but I definitely think that we're at that. Interesting. You started this business now, or this spin-off called Fast Start Go 5 years ago. What's special about this program? Why is it that we met about this program, and I found really some serious interest in what you guys are delivering today, that we're
Well,
here today talking about it.
couple of things, Erez, that really motivated us at the very beginning of Fast Start Go. And that is that 65% of companies that were surveyed, uh, technology companies, say that they're failing at onboarding new sales reps. Another 45% are saying that 45% of the folks that they hire fail within a year to 18 months. So that's costing a lot of money when you're bringing in reps and they are not staying. What we have found, the folks that come through the Fast Start Go program, our clients are seeing an 80% retention rate of the new reps that come on board. So that's a significant improvement over, not using an onboarding or sales enablement platform to bring on your new reps. The bottom line is that MSPs are good at technology, outstanding at technology. Fast Start Go is outstanding at hiring and training entry level or even post entry level sales reps and bringing them into the industry and getting them successful well within a year.
That's incredible. Yeah, and I would say that that is something, as a business owner, is very hard to do effectively. Like, unless you're very diligent, most, let's call it IT or any professional firm, they're usually on the technical side of the service they're delivering. If it's accounting, legal, IT, they're in that space. And if they're going to be looking for business development people, chances are they know very little outside of their expertise. And that's been a struggle for us in the sense of building out an onboarding, successful onboarding sales process with a
Mhm.
proper, like, yeah, we built a playbook, and yes, we built a price sheet, and we kind of slapped that together, and it was very successful. But the hardest part was the first 3 to 6 months, where the average account manager, sales rep, now that I think we call them now client concierge, the naming has evolved. I think over the decades, people want to have different titles now. But, managing that is no different than a technical playbook. But for most businesses, especially technical services like ours, the technical playbook, in the sense of onboarding a customer, setting up a server, those are sort of like in our wheelhouse. We can talk about that all day, and it's easy for us to put that together. So having a firm like yours, or a service like yours, is sort of like amazing for all small, mid-sized organizations where they don't have somebody to build that out.
Absolutely. And we have a lot of experience and success in doing it. I think the challenge is for many of the business leaders and business owners of small to medium sized MSPs and solution provider organizations is they really don't understand how long it takes to really bake the cake. In other words, take the sales rep from day one and getting them productive. Look, if we could wave the magic wand and within 3 to 6 months that person is producing enough profits that they're paying for themselves, and we would all be wildly more successful than we are today. But the reality is that what I see out there, because many of our clients are technical and have not grown up through the sales experience, they really don't understand how long it's going to take to get a rep completely independent, paying for themselves and generating, again, the necessary revenue and profits to do so. In my words, to you and to anybody else that's out there listening, it's a 6 month to 1 year investment. And if you're 3 months in and the person isn't there yet, don't be surprised. So the real question should be, how do you get the person ramped up to the point where they are generating the pipeline forecast that you're looking for that covers their overhead and then creates incremental profits for your business? The way to do that really is to build a sales process that accounts for the early stages of prospecting, qualifying new business, and ultimately getting them into that, what we would call the band qualifying stage, where we have people that are truly in, or prospective clients that are truly in market for new technology, whatever that may mean, whether it's security enhancements, new data protection solution, whatever it might be. It's not going to happen unless the person is extremely lucky within the first 90 days. What do we hope for within the first 90 days? That the person is setting up meetings, walking away from those meetings with qualified opportunities that ultimately become band qualified. And at that point, the person has a little bit of a funnel built up. And on a week to week basis, what we do is we look at that funnel growing incrementally, right? And once that top of the funnel is starting to get more robust, sales will start to flow out through the bottom of the funnel. But if we put too much, if you put too much pressure on that new rep, bring in business day 1, day 2, day 3, the rep won't be there by month 6, right? But if you train that rep day 1, day 2, day 3 to develop their prospecting and qualifying skills, and by the way, prospecting and qualifying skills have changed radically from, say, 1995 to 2026, right? The way we do it. But if we focus on those prospecting and qualifying skills over those initial 90 to, say, 180 days, 3 to 6 months, the second 6 months will start to bring in revenue, maybe not a lot of revenue, but customer and client relationships will start to develop.
Interesting. You recommend that anybody who's hiring, do you guys actually also help with the process of qualifying the candidates? Or is this something that, like, after I've gone through HR, gone on LinkedIn, Indeed, or whatever source of employment, I found my candidate, I brought them in, I've actually gone through the painstaking process of signing them. Then I throw them at the wolves to you guys and say, okay, here you go, train this person. Would you say that there's almost like a conversation of maybe even having a pre-candidacy? So like I've got right now 3 potential candidates for an account management position.
Right.
I almost want to say, do you have something there that can
Yeah, we
help
do.
me identify which one would be the best of the 3?
Yeah, we actually do we do recruiting for our clients that retain us for the Fast Start Go sales enablement program. So we'll actually go out there and recruit, qualify, and present, candidates to our clients. And we've been doing that for the last 2 years.
Wow.
And
Okay.
again, we've been having about an 80% success rate. Not everyone we bring in the door and train turns out to be a star, but a high majority of the folks that we do bring in develop into being highly productive salespeople.
Yeah, it's interesting. As an employer side, I've heard from other entrepreneurs in different industries, different hiring tactics. One I heard, he brings in 5 to 10 account managers in one room at one time and does like a group interview and sees how the one competes with the other from a pressure perspective. If they're competing, if they're, sitting back and relaxed, or they're trying to overplay the other candidate. And then the other one, which is I think more expensive, is they hire 2 to 4 people and they say there's only job for 2, but we hired 4. So 2 of you guys are going home at the end of the probationary period. And I'm sitting there going, isn't that more expensive? And they're like, well, sometimes not. So I'm like, it's interesting the new tactics I'm hearing these days.
To be honest with you, that sounds very counterintuitive to me to do that, because we as business owners and as executives and leaders are looking to build culture. And when you bring in 4 people and 2 are going to be cut from the team, you're not creating a great culture. You could still accomplish the same objective and eliminate folks that are not performing well. I think that's a good process to have, right? It's when you're managing a sales team, it's not unlike coaching a basketball team or a baseball team, which I've done in the past at various levels, right? And the batters that are not hitting above 250 or a pitcher who has an ERA that goes above 4.0 or 5.0, it's not going to make it stay on the team. I'm going to replace that person with someone else. But to create a culture where we're competing with prospective teammates, again, is not, I think, a positive vibe or a positive culture. Because the idea when you're building a sales culture is to make the vibes immaculate and positive and having everyone feel good about themselves. If you think compromising any human being's self-esteem is going to give you a positive outcome, you're sadly mistaken. It's not. Okay. I would say the best salespeople are those that come from a competitive background. The best sales managers are also people who may have a competitive background, have coached sports, have been in sports, but they understand how to create a positive culture.
Talking about, you're hiring the best rep, or the right rep is important. Business owners are always looking at end results. At the end of the day, sales hide all sins. I'm sure we've all heard that statement before. When sales are flowing, nobody's even looking at anything else. So,
Mhm.
where are companies today struggling or trying to define their pipeline and building that market demand?
Mhm.
It's sort of like that assumption. I hired this rep. You mentioned you're expecting them to go out there and generate, oodles of business, and that puts way too much pressure where there's a nurturing process to help them get to that point. But businesses at the end of the day want to see those results. So how do you guys see this market being affected, and how are you helping businesses move forward today with building that pipeline and lead gen?
We talk about situational prospecting. Situational prospecting, Erez, is not going to the yellow pages or to a list generated from Zoom or another, database engine, but it's really looking at the common sense practicality of what's going on within my own individual sales territory. So what does that relate to? It relates to a number of things. It relates to paying attention to new buildings that are going up, which could lead to new networking opportunities, or business expansion, opening up new locations, management changes, a new CIO coming in, a new CEO coming into a business. When these types of changes occur, within a organization or a business, that's an ideal time to reach out to them and see if they're interested in, revisiting their IT, their cybersecurity, data protection, or anything else that's related to what we do, as opposed to, kind of shooting from the hip and just calling down on a list. And if, you go back to, 20, 30 years ago, new reps would start, they would be given a list and they would call down on the list and some people would pick up. Reps or companies that are still taking that approach, generating a list and calling down, and then they find out very few people are picking up the phone. So why not pay attention to the dynamic activity that's going on within the individual sales territory and be more strategic and who you're reaching out to. So situational prospecting is about really strategic prospecting and responding to the business climate within the community, again, related to new buildings going up, new offices opening, expansion of existing businesses, management changes, all create opportunities, let alone just cyber liability issues that are out there. Another thing to consider. How many sales reps are partnering with cyber liability insurance companies? All of us who are end customers have cyber liability insurance premiums today that we didn't have years ago. We have them today. No business owner is pleased when they have to look at their P&L and now have yet another line item here that they have to be concerned with, an additional operating expense. We as solution providers can start to look at partnering with some of these cyber liability insurance companies and get leads, get business referrals. That's how you want to prospect today, situationally.
Yeah, business referrals, I think, has been sort of the number one source of business growth for our firm over the decades. But when you mention about being more observant around your surroundings, business openings, new buildings going up, I think that those things were, things that I took for granted at one point in time. And over the years, I've become more aggressive, trying to find those opportunities and saying, okay, new office complex going in. There's going to be 20 new businesses going into that space. How do I get in front of all those people that are moving in over the next 30 days or 90 days or even the next 12 months? Because there is that pipeline. Actually, I don't know if you saw, like, there's several American franchises coming to Canada, and they're going to be building businesses. They're going to be building shops and, stores, and somebody's going to have to put stuff in there. They're not flying all these people up from the US. They're going to be hiring local talent. And
Exactly.
so, you got to pick up the phone and find out who's doing those projects. So, same principles, I think.
It's absolutely the same principle. It's situational prospecting, looking at the business climate, where is expansion occurring, and how can we have impact on it?
Yeah. I think people take it for granted that, the doors are open. I've got my website, I'm paying somebody Google search engine optimization, and the leads are going to walk in the door. It was
Sure.
effective for a while. I won't lie. Like, we did it. We joined the Google wagon 10 years ago when it was in its infancy, and I thought it was very effective. But, looking at it today, I don't think that that is as effective as it was a couple of years ago. What do you see now happening with AI prospecting? Like, I know that this is the big buzz, so I have to ask the question, like, AI prospecting or AI lead genning. How is that impacting the market today from hiring and even account managers? How are they dealing with all of this?
AI prospecting, think if there are tools available that are going to make the sales rep far more efficient than they've been up until now, because there's availability of information and background that would take hours or period of time to do that come to our fingertips in seconds as a result of AI. We strongly recommend that our clients, and most of them obviously have adopted an AI platform to support their selling efforts. The CRMs are built that have a lot of AI functionality built into them as well. We strongly urge folks to use it. If you use it well, you're going to be more efficient, bottom line.
Right. So you're seeing it as more of a tool than an actual, call it process or replacement of the whole process.
I think it's just more of a tool. I think replacing humans with bots for selling purposes takes away the dimension of human interaction and socialization that you're really not going to get from the bot. And could the bot be a trusted advisor? Maybe to a little degree, but not to a great degree. And, we largely promote the idea of being just that, the trusted advisor. And the bot is not going to replace that.
Right. Yeah. It's funny because I see a lot of companies on social media and on the internet today advertising. I've, set up several different AI agents, and they're doing 24/7 prospecting. they're booking, 15 more appointments than the last resource. And I know it's not going across the finish line. I know that a lot of this stuff is to get you to the racing line or even
Right.
put you mid stride,
Hmm.
but it will not take you yet through the entire process and get the signed contract. Yeah, I'd be very hard pressed to see a company with 50 employees make a decision on hiring a new IT company, a new law firm, a new
Right.
accounting firm, and willing to sign a contract without even speaking to a human on the other end.
See, we in Fast Start Go, we speak about opportunities are a byproduct of relationships, and I believe that. So even if a preliminary or initial interaction is through an AI agent of some sort, it still does not enable the seller to create a life cycle relationship with the buyer. So if it's a commodity item and it's a one-time activity, then maybe the AI agent is just fine. But if we're looking for a life cycle relationship with reoccurring revenue, growth, and ability to qualify new opportunities and go deeper and wider in the account, definitely need a human to establish that kind of long-standing relationship.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I agree. The relationship side of things is something we're not going to replace anytime soon.
Agreed.
You know, talking about that, and looking at the future a little bit, what would you say, sales professionals or young kids that are want to get into sales today, what is one of the most important skills that individuals today need to have to be successful in sales?
Listening. We often think of the seller or the salesperson as a person that has a great gift of gab, could articulate, tell a story well, and that kind of thing. And I have been amongst salespeople who have great verbal abilities and skills, but yet when it comes to hitting quota, fail many times. Not always, but many times. So those that are truly successful are those that have good listening skills, comprehend, understand what the prospect's requirement is, and has the ability to bring together the necessary resources to support the prospect's requirement and or need.
Yeah, I would say that was one of my hardest lessons to learn as a young sales associate. I'm sure you heard it, throwing spaghetti on the wall. I got into a boardroom and I would just be like, "Whoosh, here's everything I got to offer," and not listening to the client's needs and not even asking the right questions. I think that would be the second most important thing from my bucket list was learn to ask the right questions and learn to listen because you got everything in your suitcase. It's great, but you can't just pour it out on the board table.
Interestingly enough, in Fast Start Go in our curriculum, the most significant section in Fast Start Go is discovery and qualifying. And we spend
Okay.
quite a bit of time training folks to ask the right questions and be able to, shut their mouth and listen to what the prospect has to say. To that end, we also have to train the reps that the questions that you might ask an IT director is somewhat different than the questions that you're going to ask a CFO or other line of business type. The other thing is if we're going into a larger organization that may have a more evolved or larger IT staff, it's important to understand and differentiate between the roles within the IT department and adjust your questions based upon what the individual's roles and responsibilities are in the decision-making process.
Well put. Well put. Well, I actually am interested. So I don't know if we touched on this or not, but all businesses, where does it fit? Fast Start Go, sales advisory. I'm a small business today, one man show or two-man show. You know, does this organization or does your service fit into that wheel, or are you more geared for like a 10 to 30 person firm? Where are you there to help business organizations really take their operations to the next?
Our service works well with both very small organizations that may be post startup, the owner or the entrepreneur that's the founding partner, maybe a sales rep or two, along with the smaller MSP that may have a staff of 20 or 30 folks as well, to the very, very large IT solution providers that may have sales departments that have 400 or 500 reps. So we have
Okay.
trained both very, very small to very, very large.
Very, very interesting. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what size of organization you've got something. You got a different wheel for each size of organization, which is cool.
Absolutely. And Fast Start Go offers really 3 or 4 different learning paths, from completely on demand. And that is about 15 hours of fully narrated IT sales training. And that's under $1,000 for that, just point of note. And that's really for the smaller entrepreneur who's just starting out. And then we also offer our virtual live, which is more of a 3-month boot camp that runs for, 4 or 5 days a week for 3 months. And that person is put through both our on demand, but they also work with our sales trainers on a day in and day out basis for 90 days. And then we also do some workshops where we'll bring in a handful of different MSPs and train up a group of their salespeople. So really depending on the prospect or the client size, we will adjust our delivery to the needs of our client, large or small.
Good to know. Great to know. So one of my last questions I wanted to ask you, you know, sales, scary part of the business, most exciting part, one of the most difficult parts to kind of master. What is one of the most outdated habits today businesses need to stop doing tomorrow?
Outdated habits,
Yes, an outdated habit.
taking folks to lunch for a 2-hour lunch, sitting down with cocktails and thinking that business is really going to get done that way. It may, but what I find today is people want to see results, not lunches, right? So, client entertainment isn't a bad thing at times, but we're really there for being a trusted advisor and helping people with their business needs.
Interesting perspective. The- I know the one challenge that I have with the lunches is the amount of time it takes and the commitment. Forget the dollar amount of the $100 steak or whatever steakhouse you go for lunch, or if you're not, you know, vegetarian, whatever salad you're going to eat. The reality is that that lunch and dinner is like a 2 hour, half my day gone to have that one conversation, and then the rest of the day is shot. So definitely not my top of my bucket list of things to do as a business sales reps, but you're correct. At the right time in the right place to kind of do a bit of a reward or some sort of sign off on an appropriate deal size. It's still, I think, some level of value, but I agree with you. If more customers are looking at, you know, making sure that they're whatever they're signing off on, if it's a new, cybersecurity, or if it's a new service
Mhm.
offering, that they're buying the right product. They're investing in you. And it doesn't matter how many steaks or how many beers or how many,
That's right.
you know, golf tournaments you take them to. If you're not going to deliver at some point in time, there's no validation to the freebies don't count anymore. So it's too much business impact there. So yeah, I agree with you. You know what? The lunches are not as top of the totem pole as they used to be.
Yeah, and we're always concerned about how we're using our time as sellers, right? And if I am doing anything that takes, more than a half hour to 45 minutes, I start to concern myself with, well, why am I not prospecting or looking for other opportunities, right? So, I could invest an hour in lunch, but I can't invest an afternoon in idle conversation.
So, we're kind of coming up to the hour here. I wanted to kind of just, wrap things up a little bit here. So, where can people get a hold of you, figure out if this is a right fit? How do people get in touch, and what's the first step that they should do
They can reach
to
out to me at K Mintzer at the TSRM group, or give me a call 609-1020, or reach out to me on LinkedIn or in any other social media platform.
Okay. And the website's Fast Start Go, or what's the website these
Yeah, the
days?
website is faststartgo.com.
Perfect. Yeah, no, listen, I appreciate it. I think we're talking obviously about it and figuring out if there's a refresh we need to do on it. But I think that there's a lot of information out there, and for every business out there that's challenged with sales, I think everybody should consider having a sales coach or sales organization help them define it. You know, you guys are obviously specialized in your vertical. Do you guys do any other industries, or is this strictly in technology?
We're simply in technology at the moment, Aries, although we've looked at our platform and it probably translates into other business to business selling environments as well. And, we're certainly open to that as we move forward with our business.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I do like the fact that you're laser focused, because
Right.
some people want that matter expert, right? Because IT, for example, is got a nuance to it where, you need to know a little bit about the IT, and you just can't talk about, filling out sales funnels. And,
That's right.
you know, there's a few out there that are, I call it generic sales training programs that I've attended,
Hmm.
and it's just way too broad, and it doesn't deal with some of the challenges that I go through. So I'm glad that you guys do focus on technology sales, and I wish you all the success. So thank you, Keith, for being on our show.
Aries, thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to re-engaging with you again in the future.
Definitely. And to all our listeners, thank you for listening to another amazing podcast today. If you liked what you heard today, please like and subscribe. It's you guys who are making this all possible. And we look forward to bringing other amazing speakers onto our show in the near future. So thank you again, everybody. Thank you, Keith. And have yourself a great day.
All right.